Well, this episode is going to prove controversial in nature, I'm sure, but I really invite you to listen to this with an open mind and an open heart. All right. I also want you to allow anything that's happening with you right now and your coworkers to be what it is and not judge it as you listen to this episode, because it's very important when you're in the workplace to stay in your highest sense of consciousness. There are actually very, very few places where you need to be this aware and coherent with your thoughts and always kind of on a little bit of an alert than when you are at work. Work is very important to strive this into this higher level of consciousness, because if you believe that all of your coworkers are your friends and then you act that way at work, it can lead to a lot of imbalance in your life. It can lead to a lot of turmoil in your life, and it will lead to a lot of hurt in your life. And in this podcast, we strive to live happier lives every single day. So let's dive into why your coworkers are not your friends. This is the Strength, Yoga, and Freedom podcast, everybody. My name is Justin. Welcome. If you're brand new here, I really invite you to check out all the links that are in the show notes or the description of the video in YouTube, if you're watching it there, to take a look at all the ways you can interact with me, as well as joining our free newsletter. It comes out once a week. It's awesome. But this is the podcast where we use the philosophy of yoga one small step at a time every single day to become happier people and people who are driven by purpose. Now, if you remember from the last new episode that aired a few weeks ago, the last brand new episode, we talked about job interviewing. And I gave you 3 tips for job interviews, and then I gave you a bonus tip. So I highly recommend you go back to the job interviewing episode, because really when you go to your job interview and you're interviewing with your potential employer, this is where all of this stuff begins with job interviewing. And that's why I put that episode out before this one, because there is so much to uncover when it comes to how you're living authentically through your job interview. So we not only talked about the authenticity piece, but we talked about mindfulness. We talked about discipline, especially in the things that you say versus when you're not speaking and you're listening. And so that area, actually, the discipline part, is what most pertains to this episode. So as I said, it all starts in the job interview. But once you get the job, then it's very important to come to a realization that the people that you work with are not your friends. Now, I am going to explain why this is in 3 parts today in this episode. But I do want to get a couple of things out of the way first before we get into those three sections. So number 1, I want to say that we're not talking about every single person you work with. So the statements that I make are not pertaining to everybody, because you may already be thinking, well, wait a minute, but one of my best friends is someone I met at work and da 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 da. I get that. I know that. I'm in the same boat as you. You are going to meet people who you're going to form and forge good friendships that go beyond the workplace. They're less common. They're in a minority, but we're not talking about those people in this episode, all right? But they are certainly still there. Now, number 2, we are also not talking about people who you already were friends with and then you started working together. So if you have friends that maybe you had before and they referred you to a job, or you referred them to your job, or maybe you both started working at the same place, you had to change towns or jobs or whatever, your market shifted, whatever it might be. We're also not talking about those people, the people who you already have a friendship forged with before you start working. And then number 3, we're also not going to eliminate certain lines of work, because this goes for all work environments, right? The stigma that, and I hear this often, that this is only a thing with people trying to be friends with each other in certain industries. That's just all a bunch of bullshit. Listen, I've worked in food service, I've worked in education, I've worked in retail, I've worked in restaurants, I've worked in technology, I've worked in sales, I've worked in customer service, I've worked in B2B, I've worked in corporate jobs, I've worked in corporate training jobs, I've worked with other training jobs, and of course I've worked as a yoga teacher in yoga studios. It is the same everywhere. No matter what your job is. So understand that this is not just, well, I work at an entry level job, or I work, and with a bunch of high schoolers, and that's how this is going to be. Okay. It's not. Okay. It goes not just when you're working with entry level or with high school kids or college kids or people who are in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. It doesn't matter. It's everywhere. And lastly, I want to talk about the difference between being friendly and being friends. There's a difference between friendliness and being friends with people. So this is where it relates to yoga a lot, because the practice of yoga is striving to connect the body, the mind, and the spirit. And one of the ways we do that is through tapas, or discipline, the fire within. So disciplining yourself to do other things that are helping you to move forward in purpose in your life. That some of the things I teach on this podcast, or some of the things you might be learning elsewhere, like having a solid morning routine, like getting up when the alarm goes off, that kind of thing, or exercising on a regular basis, or working on a project every day, or listening to your inner voice, or those whispers that whisper to you and tell you kind of how to navigate yourself through life. Those things that you practice are going to help carry into the job that you hold, and you will be able to discipline yourself to separate what being friendly means versus what a friendship is. All right. So now that we have all of that out of the way, let's get to the 3 reasons why people at your work are not your friends. And I want to start with the most important part here. Most important. And in yoga, we start from the ground up, and we're going to start from the ground up here too. And that is simply the fact that there is a common thread with everybody you work with. You know what that common thread is? Work. You're all at work. You're all going to the same place to work. That's the common thread. Now, in a friendship, though, a friendship stems from something that you have in common. A lot of us meet friends in places or things that we have in common that we do from within, which is different than when you go to work and forge or try to forge friendships. So I want you all to think about what friendship really is when you're thinking about this common thread concept. So friendship is a state that forms when you have love for each other, when you have affection for each other, when you build each other up, right? When you cheer people on for their growth and you see them, or you see them struggling and you step in as a support system, and you hold them and you keep them close to you, and you nurture people, and you're there for each other, and you grow together. You build this level of intimacy. And the other thing that you build, which is a big word, trust. This is something we're going to be hitting on later. Now, let's say you meet people through, a card game that you play. Maybe you get together every week and you play a card game of some kind, like maybe poker, for example. You are going to, if you join this card club or this poker game, suddenly you're all going there because there's a common thread. You all enjoy, it hits you somehow in your being, this card game, like it's a hobby for you. Now, for me, I like, as a lot of you know, theme parks, roller coasters, traveling. So I have met a lot of people that way because you have a common thread or a common interest. When you meet people this way, it's because you have chosen to do this. You chose to go to the poker game. You chose to join that bowling league. You chose to go be your theme park enthusiast. You chose, right, to travel through Europe backpacking, and then you meet other people who are doing that. You chose to go to an exercise class. This is meeting people because you chose to do so. What about the people who are at work? Well, you didn't choose to meet them through choosing them and that place. You are forced into that because you have to work, don't you? For most of us that work, We have to work. We don't work because we're bored. We work because we have things that we need to do, right? We need to pay bills. We need to put food on the table. We need to provide for our families. We need to provide for ourselves. And for a lot of us who work and do things with work, we are doing so because we want to progress in a career, perhaps, and maybe influence the world in a positive way by influencing decisions that certain organizations make. That might be the reason why. That might be why you go to work, all of those things. But you don't choose those coworkers who are around you. And then suddenly they're just automatically your friends out of this common interest of work. We don't have a common interest in work. We have to go to work. So you see, there's a difference there between common interests as being the thread and being forced to go to a job that you have to earn money at. Now, when you are at work, it may seem like you're bonding with someone because you have to work together on certain things. You might be working together in a shift where you're dealing with other people, like you're a nurse, or you're working in a hospital, you're a firefighter, you're working with other people because you have to do something, right? You have a goal. So any job, right? You have this like common purpose, but this is what you're doing to provide for yourself and your families and so on. That's the common thread, right? Whatever you're working on, that's the common thread. You're not going to immediately start talking with people from your work hopefully about your childhood traumas or about, your insecurities or your plans, your big plans in the future to move out of the state or move in with this other person or do this or do that, or those deep down secrets that haunt you or the things that trigger you, right? Generally, you are going to do something at your work that puts the two of you together to accomplish something like that, a goal. So you're bonded to the work. And a lot of us make the mistake of using work as a bonding tool, and that blurs the lines. And we're going to talk about blurring lines now. That's our next point. So this first point is all about this common thread. Where did your common thread come from? Something you chose, and then suddenly you can choose those friends through your common thread, right? Because you don't have to do things with them all the time. You're choosing to do things with them. At work, you have to do things with people. You're assigned to do things with people. You are forced to do things with other people, not in your common thread. Other stuff like the poker game I referenced. So let's go into blurred lines. That's number 2. Now, here's a hard truth that we have to understand. Some of you may understand this earlier in your life, some people later, whatever. Not everyone in the world has the capacity to be a good friend. I mean, they don't. It's just the way it goes. It doesn't matter why, because other people go through their own journeys at their own times. But plain and simple, not everyone in the world has the capacity to be a good friend. We make the mistake of thinking that someone who is nice at work or who is friendly at work is suddenly your friend. However, think about how much you know about other people at work with regards to their character, how they live their life. How much do you really know about those people who you're working with and how they live their life, their characters? The thing about blurred lines is it's easier to escalate the relationship, escalate it, rather than ending a personal relationship and keeping it professional. That's not easy to do. You see, going to be strictly professional after blurring lines is so much harder because you've already started to go into parts of you that maybe should not have been shared. And now that person knows things about you and things didn't end well. And now you have to be on this like professional level, which, yeah, you can make it work at work, but that doesn't mean it's comfortable. And that doesn't mean it's going to be fulfilling for you. And that doesn't mean that when this happens multiple times that you're not going to feel like a piece of like shit all the time, because when you're at work, you find that you've poured your guts out to all these people who you suddenly realize don't give a shit about you anymore. So that's where you have to watch with the lines blurring. This is why so many companies also have rules in place about, even going farther than friendships and dating or getting intimate with people. And I also want to be clear here about another part of work that is not your friend, and that's the HR department. as much as the people in HR are going to tell you how much they look out for you and your benefits and come to them when you need something and let them know if somebody's bothering you and they're not your friend. HR has one responsibility. One. And here's their responsibility: to protect the organization from liability. That's their one job. One. Everything they do is calculated. And so it's very important to understand that if you think the people who are in HR are your friends and it's cutesy to show them pictures of everybody in your house and talk about your deep, dark secrets and those people who are in your house who are causing you lots of trauma and blah, 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 the day that the company perceives that you are a threat for one reason or another, that person's not your friend. So it's very important to understand HR is not your friend as well. So let's go back to this whole blurred line thing. Surface level friendliness and boundaries are essential to keeping the lines clear, not blurred. For example, here are some things you can talk about at work with other people that keep the line, keep it separate instead of these blurred lines. Pop culture, that's neutral. Pets, neutral. Your kids, on a certain level with your kids, right? Fun things with the kids, right? You don't need to tell everybody about the trauma they're having in school or the difficulties they have with testing or those like personal things. Just fun stuff, right? Maybe your favorite TV show, movies, fashion, right? Travel, shopping, that kind of stuff. Those are all like surface level topics. Joking, having a running gag, right? I love doing that stuff at work. Having a little joke kind of takes you away from all the personal crap that we don't want to hear about. Having fun, that's all surface level, all right? But here's where the lines get blurred. Talking about your relationships to other people at work on a deeper level. Talking about your partner and the struggles in depth. Your dating life. Some people tell you non-stop about the people that they're dating. Like, do you really care when you're there trying to work about who's dating who? Maybe you do. But if you do, that's your ego getting in the way. Now, another thing is your family problems, family issues, therapy sessions, right? Your anger with other coworkers or management, talking about all that stuff. You see, these conversations should be had with people who are outside of work, who are in your close friendship circle. I have seen countless people walk into organizations and then within weeks, it seems like they suddenly know everything about everyone else. They know where they are. They know what they're doing. They have everybody's Snapchat stories. They have everybody's Instagram stories. They're commenting on what everybody's doing all the time while they're at work. They're commenting on people's breakups, get-togethers, this and that, and on and on and on and on. They also call people certain names like work mom, work dad, work wife, work husband, work bestie. I hate those terms. And here's why I hate those terms. You're putting the word work before the term friend, wife, bestie, blah, blah, blah. So you combining the word work and combining the word wife is an oxymoron. The thing about relationships at work is when you start to pour all of that genuine energy that you would pour into maybe your actual wife or your actual friends or your actual children or the people who you are bonded with, those people will reciprocate that energy back to you. When you talk about work wife, work husband, this kind of like made up relationship that has come out, all that is a mechanism for you to get through the day. That's all it is. A mechanism for you to have to get through the day. And if you really want to come into your higher self, you don't need to put a label on a relationship you have with someone who's just friendly with you at work. But if you start to blur lines into this wife, into this work daughter, there are inappropriate things that could start happening because we get carried away and we're not watching what we're doing. We're living in subconscious land. And so those other people may not reciprocate that all the time to you. So why would you waste your genuine, wonderful energy with folks who are not going to reciprocate that on stuff that's deeper than surface level? This is where inappropriate sexual relationships come from in the workplace, or other inappropriate relationships come from in the workplace that serve no purpose to what you're doing. And these are going to give you headaches down the road. Trust me. So, blurring the lines, number 2, watch that. You can separate that just as much as you can separate when you go to your poker game. Oh, I don't like the way that person handles themselves. It doesn't align with me. They're constantly cutting people down. They're constantly lying. They're not telling the truth. They're stealing, whatever. Then you can choose not to be around them, right? But at work, you can't choose that all the time. You have to be around these people. So where you give your energy is really important to that blurred lines. And finally, the third thing is purpose. Everyone has a purpose. We talk about purpose nonstop on here. When someone is at work, they have a purpose. Sometimes you must set boundaries when someone interferes with your work purpose. You must set boundaries. The key here is not to figure out what everyone else's purpose is. It's to remember what your purpose is. So here's an example. If you are someone who goes to work because that's where you are going to earn your income, your primary source of income, and then on the side, you're doing something else that's building into the life that you want to build, then that's your purpose at work. So that's the mindset that you have when you walk into work, right? Now, discipline, fire, tapas, that's where that comes in. You can't let the outside forces interrupt you, okay? So if your purpose then is to expand or grow in the job you're in, maybe you want to make that your career and you want to advance, like I said earlier, and you want to make changes from the inside out in your organization, then that's your purpose. If your purpose is to care for patients or save lives or help others in need, that's your purpose. Moving forward with direction. The mistake most people make is that they go into work and they start doing those 87 other things that are not aligned with their purpose, right? They think that their coworker friends are going to be there to support them through thick and thin, and it's just not true, okay? For example, the people who walk into work every day, do you know a person like this? Because I know people like this who walk into work, and I don't mean once in a while. I'm talking about all the time. It's a repeat behavior. And they get in and they look disheveled. They look like they just got dressed. They look like they've just come from the worst fight of their lives out in the world. And then here they are in the place of employment where someone has given them a job, where someone is paying them to be there, where someone is giving them secure, hopefully, employment to get that paycheck to provide for themselves. And they say, I just have to get my life together before I get started. Oh my God. Right? That's a red flag. Immediately a red flag. This is someone who's coming into work with no purpose, right? If someone can't wait to go home 3 minutes after they got to work, that's another red flag. These are people who most likely also are not going to stop complaining about wanting to go home through their entire duration of time at work, okay? Until they walk out that door, that's when they'll finally stop complaining. I have worked with countless numbers of people who are never happy. They bitch because they get this particular schedule that they have, and they bitch and bitch and bitch and bitch and bitch, and then the schedule changes to a schedule that they wanted to have, and then they bitch and bitch and bitch and bitch and bitch about that schedule that they have, right? That's an example. Or people who bitch about protocols or procedures that may or may not be working in the organization, but they bitch to everybody else every time something goes wrong. And instead of constructively or with confidence going to the people who make the decisions about procedures, like managers or whoever, and having a conversation, say, hey, this is why this isn't working. Can we just at least talk about this? Because when something isn't working and all you do is bitch and whine about it, you're giving energy to that thing that's not working anymore. And that's a red flag for someone who's not going to be your friend. Would you allow a friend to do that constantly? Bitch and whine and complain to you all the time while you're at home, and you're over here trying to be a happy person, and they're bitching and bitching and bitching and putting you down and putting you down and putting everybody else down and putting their schedules down and putting that. That's not somebody you want to be your friend. That's someone who's dragging you down. You see what I'm saying? Okay? Those folks are not your friends who are at work. It's important to have rapport with people at work, though. That's a whole different story. Rapport builds work bonds. Now, work bonds are different than friendship bonds. Work bonds are when you are connecting with people in purpose, right? So you and another person both understand this is my role in the organization. This is how we're going to move forward in the organization. This is how I'm going to do my job to the best of my ability, and so on and so forth. And another person's doing the same thing, and you bond like that, whether it's a coworker or it's a manager or it's a supervisor or it's a leader of some kind. When you bond like that with work, that's the person who later you go to for references, for recommendations, character references, right? And so those are the people who will then help you down the road, even though it's just a little bit of a work bond. They help you, and in turn, helping you, they feel good because it feels like they have helped you feel like you matter. And that makes them feel like they mattered in the work relationship that you have. So that's different. Building a rapport is way different than feeling like you're just bonded to people because you're doing the same activities together at work, okay? And so I want to give you a couple of final notes before we end this episode here. Because we remember that this is the podcast where we take action. We don't just sit around and do nothing and listen to this and then critique ourselves. We actually take action to go forward. So here's my first note for you. Number one, when you're at your job, you're collecting a paycheck. Your paycheck is given to you to perform a set of tasks and maintain a level of responsibility. That responsibility is not socialization. It's not getting everybody's phone numbers and knowing where everybody is on their Snapchat stories. That's not what you're getting paid for. You are getting paid to do a job. When you start tinkering around with other things like that, your job performance suffers. So if you want to drive yourself in the lane of purpose, you are going to stay in your lane of purpose and not worry about everyone else's purpose. And those who are actually traveling along with you in their lane of purpose, they're going to align with you naturally. And that's where you form those work bonds. Number two, you keep work at work and keep your deep personal conversation to the friends who are not working with you, okay? Because that, when you have to talk about your job, which most of us have to do, talking about it with other people who are working at that same job that are really not your friends, it's just a bitch fest. And it does nothing to solve anything. But having constructive conversations with the people you love outside of your work is far more productive than bitching with the people you work with. So think about this. Think about this too. How many people do you know who are in your life now as a close friend who you have really bonded with that you met at a job? Now, some of you may have worked with 100 people in your whole life. Some of you may have worked with 50. Some of you may have worked with 500 people. Some of you may have worked with thousands of people. Can you count how many people out of all the jobs you've had you are still super close to? And I bet it's a very low percentage, if there's a percentage at all. Because when we move in life and our stages move and we change in our direction, sometimes that requires leaving jobs. And when your job changes or you leave your job, or God forbid your business closes, which we all now have more of a kind of an interest or kind of we can relate to this more now than ever before because of what happened over the past several years with certain mandates that came down that said you must shut down your business, with nothing that came of it, of maybe never reopening again. So a lot of us had this happen already. And when that happens, who are the people you're still in contact with, even to this day? Some of you may have higher numbers than others, but no one's going to sit there and go, out of the 3,000 people I worked with, I have 3,000 close personal friends. Just doesn't work like that. It doesn't. So I want you to really think about that when you were talking about the way you have conversations with other people. You see, friendships are not just based on work. You're choosing your friends, not being forced into friendships. So it's a sad truth that everyone you work with cannot be trusted. And if you are perceived to be in the way of someone else's progress up the ladder, and that other person you think is your friend, but they're manipulating all their way around to get higher, you're fucked. Because they're going to select the way that they're going to do better in their job and their providing and their income over anything else. So that's another reason why it's very important to watch out who you're involved with when it comes to work. If you're working with integrity all the time and you're doing good work and you don't get noticed for it and you don't succeed, which you should if you're doing work that's really you're extremely intentional, you're extremely purposeful, and you do it with integrity, you are going to succeed. Okay, you're going to. If you don't, that's the universe signaling to you to change jobs, because you're moving forward and there's other people around you who either don't want you to move forward or there's something else going on in that organization that's not a right fit for you. So just know that sometimes you do have to change jobs or change paths if you get to a ceiling and you're stuck. But if you try to manipulate your way up there, that's going to turn into an even bigger disaster. So in conclusion, it all goes back to purpose. If you're going to work and you're doing purpose-driven actions, you will succeed without having to control or to manipulate. You are going to succeed if you put in the work, because the mistake a lot of us try to make is we try to control success through means of being friends with everyone and manipulating everything and getting involved in everything. And it's just not the best way to move forward in a life with fulfillment, peace, harmony, and that sense of feeling like you're one with yourself. So everyone else, for the most part, might be playing on this lower level of consciousness field. Think about it. How many people at work do you see who just always are hanging around? How many cliques do you see at work? How many groups do you see at work that they go out and drink after, or they go to do this activity after, or they do all these other things after? And when they're there doing those things, they are bonding over life issues like partnerships and dating and all these other things. And then all that stuff gets spread out through the workplace and makes it an uncomfortable environment. Your real friends are not going to socialize with everybody else about all your dating woes and all of your personal problems, but they are going to cheer you on and be there for you and support you and see you for who you are authentically. And that's the difference between a work friend and a true friend. So until next month, when I see you again with a couple brand new episodes in December, I want you to really take an inventory of who you're interacting with at work and how you're interacting with those people at work. Maybe it's time to make some shifts, because not everybody is your friend. I can't wait to see you next time. Wishing you a lot of love and a lot of light and a lot of happiness, because you deserve it. See you then, next time. Bye-bye.